911, where is your emergency?
I'm on North 225 West Road. There's a body hanging off the bridge, no head. There's a car coming.
Okay.
There's a dead body.
That's a deer.
Are you sure?
Yeah. But I'll back up and I'll check.
I'm on the phone with the cops now.
Okay, she thinks it's a deer?
No, it's a body. It's a body.
From what I can tell, it looks like an arm.
Yeah, that's what I've seen, with no head. I'm freaking out.
You're fine. I'm going to pull over and I'm going to stay with you.
Okay. I never seen something like this.
On August 20th, 2020, officers responded to this bone-chilling phone call. At 5 a.m., they swarmed the Sugar Creek Bridge, and upon arrival, they were taken aback by the ghastly scene before them. What had momentarily been mistaken for roadkill was a deceased, middle-aged woman. Her body was badly bruised, her arms were bent at odd angles, and most disturbingly, her head was gone. How and where she'd been left only made the scene harder to stomach. Closer inspection revealed that she wasn't next to the bridge's guardrail. Rather, she'd been stuffed underneath it, so that her upper body was splayed out on the road while her legs hung limply off the side of the bridge. At the same time that police were working to make sense of what might have happened to their headless Jane Doe, Indiana resident Michael Parks was making a 911 call to report his wife, Hope Parks, missing.
Hi, my name is Michael Parks, and me and my wife, we kind of got into an argument Tuesday, and I haven't seen her, and I'm getting worried.
Okay, what's her name?
Hope. Somebody picked her up. She got into a car with somebody, and they left. It was either a silver or a white, like, Honda Civic.
Following this call, a sergeant from the Crawfordsville Police Department briefly spoke with Michael over the phone to get a description of his missing wife. Michael described a few of Hope's tattoos, one being a heart with his name on it. After police inspected the body's tattoos, Michael was instructed to immediately make his way to the Crawfordsville Police Department to speak further about his wife's disappearance. Only when he arrived at the station was Michael informed that the headless woman they'd found that morning matched his description of his wife. For the sake of the investigation, he was immediately escorted into an interrogation room, where the following never-before-seen footage was recorded.
One thing I do, I record everything, so my notes suck. I can't write with crap, so I do record everything. One thing, what is your full name, sir?
Michael Dale Parks.
Okay.
Interrogation rooms can be scary places, but Michael has been brought into a soft interrogation room. This is highly unusual. These soft rooms are primarily used for victims, usually children. As the grieving husband, the police may have chosen this room to offer him a bit of comfort. However, in most cases, the spouse is the prime suspect until they're cleared. If the police do suspect Michael, the choice of a soft room could then be an attempt to put him at ease. As well, the detective is making sure to alleviate any of Michael's possible concerns by telling him that the recording is for the detective's own notes.
What'd you call the police department about?
I'm worried about her.
You're worried about your wife?
Yes.
Okay. Why? What's going on? I mean,
We've been arguing over my son for the last couple of months.
Okay.
He's in and out of drugs. Can't keep a job. He brought drugs into the house. I kicked him out. I don't want him there. She wants him there. It got to the point where I told her to choose between me or him. One of us has got to go. Well, he left. She's been wanting him to come home. I say no. He got a speeding ticket and the proof of no insurance or whatever they call that. He has the car. It's his car. It's in my wife's name.
Oh, okay.
But he paid her for the car. He never took the title. I told her to give it to him, cancel the insurance. She never did. So that's how the argument started.
In just the first few minutes, Michael has made several assertions that indicate possible control issues. He's cited several instances where he's told his wife what to do rather than communicating and making decisions together.
She texted me, asked me if I called the insurance. I said no. I said, I haven't had time. You can read it.
Okay. Let's see.
Notice how Michael rubs his face after handing his phone to the detective, then proceeds to partially cover his mouth with his hand, keeping it there for the next couple minutes. Michael is also covering his genitals here. This is a common barrier used by men when they feel threatened or stressed. These gestures convey anxiety and uneasiness, not unusual for someone who's just lost their spouse. However, hiding the face is also typical of someone who might be trying to hide something else.
Your son has some drug issues or anything? Does your wife have any alcohol or drug issues?
No.
Is there anything that...
No.
Okay.
She's very controlling.
Michael's answer here is completely irrelevant to the question. Instead of simply responding with information about Hope's substance abuse, he goes into a rather sudden and impertinent spiel about how controlling she is. So far, Michael has taken almost every chance to speak negatively of his wife, even if it wasn't warranted.
As far
She's
as
very, very clean.
self-control or controlling on everybody?
Controlling on everybody.
Okay. Okay.
Which I'm used to it. They don't bother me.
Yeah, for 25 years. You find your niche. I mean,
I've gotten used to it. I take medication. I do have anger issues, but I take medication for it. But I've never done anything.
Michael continues to divulge information that wasn't asked for. The fact that he has anger issues, which he takes medication for, clues detectives in on Michael's capacity to become violent. He then feels it necessary to include that he's never done anything violent to his wife. What Michael is doing here is oversharing, or volunteering unnecessary and excessive amounts of information. Oversharing is, more often than not, a nervous attempt to convince others that one is being open and honest. However, as you can see here, it often has the opposite effect. It's entirely possible that Michael could be oversharing to alleviate anxiety, as some people tend to do.
okay. So nothing controlled substance, no Xanax or anything like that. Okay. Now, and granted, it's what all families do as well, especially if you're arguing over a kid and stuff.
I want to hurt him. I hate to say this and have it on recording, but I do. I want to hurt him. That's why he had to go.
Michael doesn't even let the detective finish his question before he goes off on another tangent. This time, he derails the conversation to the topic of his son, John. Admitting to something less egregious in order to appear completely transparent is a common tactic used to gain the trust of others.
Would she confide in him or your daughter?
Yes.
Or
Him.
okay.
Me and my daughter are real close. Her and John are real close. She'll do anything for her, which that's what makes me mad.
Michael clearly possesses a considerable level of bitterness toward his wife concerning how much she dotes on their son. Not only that, but up to this point, Michael has centered the entire interrogation around how toxic he believes his wife and son are, painting John as the problem and his wife as an out-of-control enabler. If he did have something to do with what happened to Hope, he's just established a clear motive for himself.
When she left, you started getting in the car. Right? Did you happen to see the driver at all? Couldn't tell, male, female, anything?
Frankly, Michael seems much more concerned about their intermarital issues than he does about the fact that his wife might have been found dead just that morning.
Has she ever been known to kind of step outside the marriage at all? Is there nothing?
No.
Nobody from her past that she could run to?
We used to live in Illinois. Me and my daughter talked about that. I said, if anything, it's my daughter. I haven't told her yet.
Well, and we're still, I mean, they're still doing some stuff somewhere else. So that's why we're talking to you to get information. And I actually don't even know what all the officers told you. I'm just trying to get
He just
overall picture.
told me that the tattoos that I described to him, which I do have pictures of them, the tattoos matched the description.
You said earlier you were going to give her till Friday. What made you decide to go ahead and call today?
My emotions. I'm very worried. I'm very worried about her. I miss her.
In addition to stuttering throughout his answer, Michael appears to break eye contact with the detective for a moment and looks directly at the camera. He seems uncertain in what he's saying.
We may have found her. So we're still looking into that.
Before now, Michael has been informed that the tattoos found on the headless woman matched those of his wife. However, hearing the news again begets a distressed reaction, which is expected. He covers his mouth with his hand and looks away from the detective. He also uncrosses his leg, a shift referred to as an anchor point movement. When someone is stressed, you'll commonly see shifts in their anchor points. In the case of a person who's sitting down, like Michael, their anchor points are their legs, buttocks, and back. Though his physical reaction is appropriate, it seems oddly void of the usual overwhelming anger or sadness that you might see from someone in Michael's position.
What made you think that something had happened to her?
I think it's just stress. I didn't think anything happened to her. It's just worried. I wanted to know where she was.
This question is at first met with silence from Michael, perhaps because it requires him to go into detail about how he feels about his wife's disappearance. He seems uncomfortable and exasperated, but he proceeds to mumble an answer from behind his hand.
He's going to go over a couple papers with you as far as the consent, and just consent to search your house and the car, because there's some things we need to find out about her. Because like I said, I don't know her, I don't know you, because we need to find out how she got
search her car?
Yeah, but I'll go ahead and let him fill that paperwork out. I'll step outside and I'll try to get some more information.
Michael's body language is very important here. At the mention of needing to search their home and car, Michael begins to noticeably fidget. He rubs his face and his leg begins to shake, though he seems to catch it and get himself back under control. Michael is then left alone in the interrogation room for the next few minutes. He changes positions and fidgets quite frequently. At one point, he even puts his head in his hands. These gestures signify stress and uneasiness.
What we'd like to do is be able to get consent, and we'd like to be able to get that from you. Is that something you'd be willing to do?
I can bring you the car right now if you want.
Normally, a search warrant is required to search someone's property. It's common knowledge that in order to obtain a search warrant, police must have probable cause, or specific facts that would lead a person to believe that evidence of a crime is located on someone's property. However, it's a lesser-known fact that police can simply ask an individual for permission to search their property. The owner's written consent is just as valid as a search warrant, and officers will often try to garner consent to search from the suspect first, especially in time-sensitive cases, as it saves them a lot of precious time and resources.
Okay. I'm going to go over this with you, okay, sir? Are you able to read and write and understand the English language?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Note how his hands are positioned. When a person feels threatened or stressed, they'll sometimes subconsciously take up a position that protects or covers their vital body parts. Given the circumstances, he has plenty of reason to be anxious that could have nothing to do with guilt. He might simply be displeased with the idea of strangers rummaging through and taking things that belong to his possibly deceased wife.
The shakes.
would you like either a bottle of water or anything? Okay.
Also, Michael's shakes are likely spurred on by intense levels of anxiety and shock that he's experiencing. Shaking is a common physical reaction to bad news. During this break in the interview, CPD officers made a beeline for Michael's residence to execute their search. They scanned the exterior of the property before thoroughly searching the inside of the Parks home for any clues as to where Hope might have gone on the night that she disappeared. What they would find in and around the Parks property would only raise more questions about Hope's disappearance. Questions that detectives hope Michael can answer for them. Following the break, detectives bring Michael back into the interrogation room in hopes that he may shed some light on their unexpected findings.
Do you know of anybody that would want to hurt her? You said she wasn't close to anybody else. I mean, somebody that would be,
She knows how to piss people off, I can tell you that.
She knows how to piss people off, or you know how to piss people off?
No, she knows how.
It's chilling that Michael can describe his wife in such a shocking and insensitive way right after she's been found so devastatingly mangled and discarded. Perhaps he's using a bit of humor to cope with his feelings, or perhaps detectives are getting a peek into Michael's true feelings toward his wife.
Part of what we were looking for, and we found some blood at your house. Would there be any reason why there would be blood at the house?
The question of the blood is sprung on Michael quite suddenly, likely in the hopes that they'll catch him off guard in a lie. This is called a bait question. The detective will carefully observe Michael's behavioral responses to this question.
Me? I cut myself. My finger. I smashed my finger.
There was some blood located in the garage.
That would be when I smashed my finger. I was doing the transmission. And you say you saw the motor and stuff in there, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
See the truck? It's a badass truck.
The remark about his truck seems completely inappropriate given the circumstances. However, it's not uncommon for someone who's experiencing high levels of uneasiness to make out-of-place comments in a subconscious attempt to escape the situation.
So this is kind of where you need to kind of step up to the plate and tell us what happened. It was at your house that something happened to her.
Not with me.
There's nobody else that could have been.
I don't know what to tell you.
Michael simply shrugs off the detective's theory that he somehow took part in his wife's murder. A person in his position would typically react with some measure of shock or outrage at such an accusation. Michael, on the other hand, doesn't even seem interested in what they found inside his home or what the findings could possibly mean.
Saying I did something?
Yeah. And we're just trying to figure out, I mean, obviously, you're not a bad person. You've got 2 kids with her. You've lived a long life with her.
This is a strategically placed pacifier since, if Michael becomes too upset, he might close himself off or request a lawyer. This would immediately end the interview. It's in the detective's best interest to keep Michael open and willing to answer questions.
I didn't do anything. I swear to God, I did not do anything.
Swearing to God serves a similar function as a qualifier here. It's used as an attempt to add credibility to a statement that's otherwise hard to believe. This is called bolstering.
Well, part of it is, like I said, we went through the whole house. We found everything.
The detective is intentionally being vague about what investigators found at Michael's home in order to gauge Michael's reaction before the big reveal.
What's everything?
Her. The rest of her.
Okay.
So
What?
her head. You know, we found everything.
This is a critical moment in the interrogation, but caught under the microscope of what should be a bone-chilling reveal, Michael's response is rather dull. There's no immediate reaction, and the reaction he does give seems to be one of exasperation rather than shock or concern. He exhales deeply, leans back, and, most notably, he covers his face once again, a move we've come to recognize as a possible attempt to hide something that the face might give away. Hope's head is perhaps the most incriminating thing that officers found inside the home. However, that's not all they found. An exterior search of the property yielded several blood smears and stains on the gravel in front of the garage door, in the grass next to their back patio, on the wood floor of the patio itself, as well as on the ramp that leads up to the patio. Blood smears as well as bloody footprints were found inside the garage. A bullet casing was also found in the grass near the patio. The interior of the home was reportedly very clean and well kept. That is, until officers got to the basement. Spots of blood were visible on the steps leading down into the foreboding cellar. Continuing down the stairs, it became apparent that there were drag marks in the shallow layer of dirt that covered the concrete basement floor. Large bloody zip ties and torn pieces of plastic were also found in several locations around the basement. Down there among the dust and discarded equipment, officers made the most unsettling discovery of the investigation: Hope's severed head. It had been wrapped in plastic shopping bags placed in a shallow hole in the floor and covered in dirt and debris, hidden by a pile of flex ducts that had been arranged on top of the grave. Circumstantial evidence makes it apparent to everyone present that Michael had something to do with his wife's murder. However, there's not yet any physical proof that he is the one that hurt Hope.
So, and obviously you're not a bad person. You provided for your family. You've done. So what happened? What snapped?
Here, the detective is suggesting a lighter version of events, that Michael simply snapped under the pressure of his controlling wife. This version paints him as a generally good person, maybe even as a victim himself. However, if Michael were to go along with this reasoning, he'd still be admitting to killing his wife.
I know what you're thinking, but no, it wasn't me. I'm sorry.
Who else could be?
Talk to my son.
Michael has gone out of his way to paint his son in a negative light. Now he's finally come out and said what he seems to have been implying. He claims that his son John is likely responsible for Hope's death.
I've told you we've had people come to the house. My neighbors know about it.
Yeah, I've talked to him quite a bit today. But part of it too, you're telling your son, if he's screwing up, you need to step up to the plate. And if you screwed up, you need to step up to the plate.
Yes, I understand.
There's nobody that's going to hurt your wife like you would hurt her. And that's what happened to her.
It wasn't me. No.
Before Michael denies involvement this time, we catch a brief moment of hesitation, as if he's thinking about something before he seems to snap back. He then makes several sudden movements. He shifts his legs, buttocks, and back, all three anchor points that we discussed earlier. Michael's denial is rather weak, using one-word answers and looking away. An innocent person would be forceful and adamant with their denial when being accused of murdering their wife. He's likely reflecting on his decisions up until this point and weighing his options.
Next person I need to talk to is your daughter, and I'm going to have to explain to you.
Talk to my daughter.
Go and have a seat, sir.
The detective instructs Michael to sit back down to reassert his authority and for safety reasons, as he wants to be able to see him. Michael's resolve is visibly wearing down under the pressure. Pacing is notoriously a nervous act, an effort to release nervous energy and ease mounting tension.
Something happened to her that night, and something happened to her at your house. You were the only one there at your house that night.
I guess this is the part where I need a lawyer, because you're not listening to me.
To invoke one's right to an attorney, the suspect should unequivocally declare that they want to speak to an attorney. However, if the suspect gives a more ambiguous remark about obtaining counsel, most courts require the interrogator to inquire further to clarify their desire. Michael has not yet stated clearly that he wants legal representation.
I guess this is the part where I need a lawyer.
Therefore, detectives can legally continue to question him, but ideally should have clarified if he was requesting counsel or not before continuing. Otherwise, they risk the rest of his statements being inadmissible.
I'll answer your questions. I'm just saying, I didn't do this.
Okay.
And you can ask me this 100 times, and I'm still going to tell you, I did not do this.
You're the only one at the house. You're the only one who could know what happened to your wife. Okay? You didn't mean to do this to her.
Michael's body language indicates that he's shut down. The protective position of his arms across his body is a self-soothing behavior that indicates that he's closing himself off from the situation, likely due to sheer discomfort and stress.
So we're trying to ask you, how did she lose parts of her body in your house?
No clue.
Do you have a clue?
No, I do not.
Yeah. There's nowhere else for us to look. There's nowhere else for us to go. There's nobody else to talk to about this. But
All right, I want a lawyer.
And just like that, the interview is over. This time, Michael has clearly communicated his desire to speak to a lawyer. The detectives are no longer allowed to ask him any more questions.
It's bad laughter.
Over the next 10 minutes, Michael attempts to make conversation with the detective who's no longer inclined to speak with him, since the detective can't question him any further. After the detective refuses to allow Michael another smoke break, Michael gets up and begins to anxiously pace the room once more. When he sits back down, he sits on the side of the couch that's the farthest from the detective. This clearly communicates his desire to escape the situation as soon as possible. Finally, the silence is broken by a police officer who has come to put Michael in handcuffs. His hopes of removing himself from the situation are dashed.
You guys got this all wrong.
Can't talk to you anymore, but it's
Michael makes one last plea of innocence, but detectives are no longer feeding into it. He's escorted to a holding cell by a pair of armed police officers. However, this isn't the last that detectives will hear from Michael. Over the next few days, officers continue to investigate the Parks' home and cars, follow up on potential leads, and speak to the couple's friends and family members. Detectives have lost hope of getting any valuable information out of Michael. That is until 4 days later, when he unexpectedly requests to speak to detectives again without a lawyer present.
Hey there, Mr. Parks. Sure you remember me from the other day? Okay.
This interview takes place the following Monday.
It was Tuesday. I got off work early at 3:30. I was home by 4:15. Kids came over. Like I said, that was not a lie. We were arguing, like I said, over my son. I was on the back porch after everybody left. I was going to shoot a groundhog. I had groundhogs in the backyard. I knew it. My neighbor does. He never came back. I went to discharge the gun. I shot 3 rounds into the tree. I went in the house. I was going to clean the gun. I sat at the kitchen table. It went off. There was still 1 round in it. She hit the floor. She was fixing dinner, and I panicked. I just flat out panicked. I didn't know what to do.
In the state of Indiana, accidentally killing someone doesn't make a person guilty of murder. To be considered a murder, the prosecution must prove that the killing was intentional. Therefore, if detectives accept Michael's version of events, then the most Michael can be charged with in the state of Indiana would be reckless homicide. Even then, in order to win a reckless homicide charge, the prosecution would have to prove that Michael was acting recklessly, and that his recklessness somehow led to Hope's death.
There was blood everywhere. I covered it up. I picked everything up. I cleaned the mess up. I put it in the garbage. Everything else is just kind of a blur.
If Hope's death was an honest accident, it doesn't make logical sense that he would try to cover it up. Typically, when someone has accidentally hurt another, especially someone they love, their first move would be to call for help or to take some action to try to save their life. Michael, on the other hand, didn't even try to correct his supposed mistake. To make matters worse for detectives, Michael's story not only features unlikely details, but also missing details or blurs that detectives have to uncover. His recount is seeming more unreliable as it unfolds.
what do you do after that?
I sat there and I cried. I thought about everything that was going on with fighting, with John, with the gun. Nobody was going to believe me.
Michael has gotten to what is supposedly a very emotional and traumatic moment in his story. Therefore, it's odd that he recounts it with little emotion. His lack of emotional reaction over the course of the interviews is noteworthy.
I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry I lied.
No, that's fine. Now here's a chance for you to tell us what happened. So she's on the floor. You're upset, obviously. What did you do at that point?
I wrapped her in a tarp and took her down to the basement. I cleaned everything up.
By telling detectives how he moved the body and cleaned the scene, Michael might have just unknowingly admitted to tampering with evidence. Even if he does secure himself a lesser murder charge, the prosecution could potentially use that information against him to get him more jail time.
When you took her downstairs, you said you wrapped her up in a tarp.
Where was the blue tarp?
Michael covers his face entirely with his hand, and his voice breaks as if he's crying. It doesn't seem that there are any other indicators of genuine emotion, though. No sniffles, tears, or heavy breathing. If this is an attempt to feign sadness, it's a rather lackluster one. It's more likely that this performance is an excuse to hide his face, which Michael has proven to do when he's lying.
I only know about guns and what people tell me, so I'm just regurgitating information as far as...
That's the only gun I've ever fired.
Okay. The closer you are to something or somebody, you get more residue, and the further away, the less residue you get when you fire the gun. So she seemed to have some residue around the entry wound. So that would indicate that the gun would be closer, 4 or 5 feet.
This single piece of evidence puts a rather large hole in Michael's story. If Michael can't bridge this gap between his story and the evidence, it would be nearly impossible for Michael's attorneys to prove that the shooting was accidental.
And for me to be able to help, I gotta know your side.
I don't know how close she was standing. I know that she was getting ready to fix dinner. That's all I know. And I sat down. I had the gun in my hand. That's when it went off. I'm telling you, I did not do it deliberately.
Michael likely knows that he's in a deep hole right now, since his assertion that he didn't deliberately shoot his wife isn't said with much conviction. On the contrary, it seems there are notes of desperation in his voice. He needs detectives to believe his story, yet he's likely very aware that his defense of "I don't know" isn't helping his case at all.
The doctor and the gun shop, he actually put in his report that it was a contact wound, which means the barrel was close to the skin when it went off.
Then maybe she was closer than what I thought.
Now that detectives are back on the topic of the gunshot wound, Michael has wrapped his arms tightly around himself. This is a protective position that may be Michael's attempt at self-soothing. It's clear that Michael is uncomfortable with this subject, very possibly because he doesn't have an answer for it.
So if you're at the table and she's at an angle, Can I get some water?
It seems that Michael might be asking for some water to create a break in the conversation, perhaps to buy himself time to think of a sufficient answer to the detective's questions.
There's going to be 2 schools of thought on this. One, somehow you tragically shot her with the muzzle of the gun touching the back of her head. Or 2, there was a disagreement, there was an argument, and a snap.
There was no
bad judgment. No argument after everybody left.
No argument.
Were you still just upset from the argument earlier? It's just people on the outside looking in.
I don't care what anybody else thinks. The whole thing was shooting her. If she was where she was standing, I don't know. If she was right there, I don't know. I did not stick the gun to the back of her head and pull the trigger. I did not do that.
And all I'm telling you is the science proves differently.
Then she was closer than what I thought.
A lot closer.
That's all I can say.
Okay. You didn't want her to die.
No.
But circumstances led to her death. What was the mental capacity of you at the time? Were you so enraged from an earlier argument that she mouthed off something and you don't know what you did?
The detective is offering Michael a way out by suggesting that his actions were simply triggered by something that his wife might have said. This shifts some of the blame onto his wife, which may make it easier for Michael to admit his part in what happened.
Kind of a Tasmanian devil kind of event after she's on the ground. You lost it. And it's okay to tell me that because that shows emotion.
And before he came in, that was the one thing that I was trying to figure out what happened. The hamburger, if she's down here.
I think I'm the one that knocked it off the stove.
Can you tell us what's going on when that hamburger gets knocked off the stove?
Yeah, I think I called myself an idiot. The you do?
By recalling what specific words he used at the time, he might be trying to draw attention away from what actually caused the hamburger to be knocked off the stove, such as a fight or struggle.
Ever been a problem with that rifle's trigger and going off when you didn't want it to, or?
Not that I know of, no. I didn't even have it that long.
Okay.
Maybe a week and a half.
The fact that Michael had only been in possession of the rifle for such a short period of time could be used as evidence against him in court. The prosecution could make the case that it was reckless of Michael to be wielding a loaded firearm that he wasn't familiar with indoors, especially next to a family member. The detective begins questioning Michael about the details related to dismembering his wife.
I mean, none of us are young anymore, so, I mean, your skin doesn't stay like it should. So each drag, did like just the muscle and the skin go with it?
I don't even remember doing it.
Don't remember that part. Yeah. And that's the brain again, trying to protect you from typically the goriest, most traumatic parts.
Another benefit of Michael's selective memory defense is that he doesn't have to disclose the gory details of what it was like to cut off his wife's head. He could be under the impression that giving those details would only serve to make him appear more like a cold-blooded killer.
There is no way that the gunshot happened the way you're presenting it. So this is the time.
Like I said, I don't remember exactly how it happened. I'm telling you, I did not do it on purpose.
Didn't kill her on purpose or didn't shoot her on purpose?
I didn't shoot her on purpose.
The detective's question implies that Michael might have intended to shoot Hope without intending to actually kill her. However, under Indiana law, this is actually somewhat of a false dichotomy. Murder in Indiana is classified as any killing done purposefully or knowingly. Here, knowingly means taking action without the specific intent to kill a person, but nonetheless with knowledge that death is substantially certain to occur. Since the evidence from Hope's autopsy proves that Michael shot his wife at point-blank range, even if he didn't exactly intend to kill her, Michael could still be convicted of murder simply because he was knowledgeable that such an action would almost certainly result in her death.
It just happened.
So, in your opinion, would you call that just recklessness? It was just, I mean, because if you've got it up in the air, nobody's going to say, well, I mean, you couldn't have shot her if it was laying on the table facing down the hallway.
Reckless, yes.
Unbeknownst to him, under Indiana law, Michael has just admitted to reckless homicide.
The conversation we were having at the time was over John. With the insurance, the car insurance. Because she lied to me over the car insurance. She told me that she was going to cancel the insurance.
This detail makes the circumstances surrounding Hope's death much different. He's admitted that he and his wife actually were arguing at the time he was in the kitchen with the gun, whereafter she turned around and walked away. This version of events shows an obvious motive and opportunity for Michael to shoot her in the back of the head. It makes you wonder what else Michael has lied about thus far.
Are you a fist-pounding kind of guy when you're mad? You're like, damn it, woman, just do what I'm asking you to do. And the gun was in your hand, unfortunately, at that time. Squeeze reflex?
Yes. I don't remember everything. But what you said makes sense. Like I said, it was not intentional.
Michael seems to finally be resigning himself to some explanation of how he shot Hope, probably after realizing that detectives weren't going to back down until his story matched the evidence.
I just want to know why. Because that's the same thing you're going to want to know. Same thing your daughter wants to know. When your son wisens up, it's the same thing he's going to want to know.
I know why it happened, and I can never tell him. I can't do that to him, because that's the reason why I pulled the trigger. Not intentionally.
Again, Michael cites his son as the reason for his plight. However, this is the first time he specifically said that John is the reason that he killed his wife. He quickly tries to backtrack, though the statement implies that Michael is probably more aware of the reason behind Hope's death than what he's letting on. He may have slipped up due to stress and fatigue from the long interrogation. After 4 long hours, the interrogation is now over. Michael is escorted from the interrogation room without further incident. Following his interview, Michael was moved to Montgomery County Jail, where he sat for almost 2 years. He was scheduled to stand trial in front of a jury on May 9, 2022. That is, until investigators made a single haunting find that would spell doom for Michael's case. It was discovered that prior to Michael murdering his wife, he'd been doing online research on the effectiveness of bottle silencers. Bottle silencers are makeshift gun silencers constructed simply from plastic bottles. Not only that, but he'd also looked into whether pillows could be used to muffle gunfire. This discovery proved that the murder of 44-year-old Hope Parks was indeed premeditated, and under Indiana state law, crushed all possibility of Michael receiving anything less than a murder charge. On May 6, 2022, Just 3 days before he was scheduled to stand trial, Michael changed his plea from not guilty to guilty and accepted a negotiated plea deal. On May 9th, Michael Parks was found guilty of the murder of his wife, Hope Parks. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole. We reached out to Michael through email to see if he would be willing to share his side of the story and answer some of our questions about the case. At first, we didn't hear back, but when Michael finally responded, he stated that he would only participate in a discussion if we met his list of demands, including $300 to be put into his commissary account and for a fan and a television, specifically 36 inches or more, to be shipped to his facility. We did not agree to any of these terms and are still waiting to hear back if Michael will speak with us. Michael is set to be released in 2070 when he is 94 years old.